Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. You're with me, Mazlina Ismail. Alhamdulillah on IKIM Inspirasi Inforia Islami. You can also view us on IKIM FM Facebook other than listen to us on radio. And inshallah this week on Open Forum every Sunday at 5:15 p.m. we are back to share with you on our next topic, which is addressing political apathy. And we have Puan Annie Zahura Abdul Aziz, Fellow at Center for the Study of Sharia Law and Politics IKIM. Assalamualaikum. Puan Annie,
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh, Mas.
thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on the in the studio, basically
Alhamdulillah.
online.
Yes, that's right. So inshallah, as spoken just now, addressing political apathy is our topic this week. And would you like to first, explain to us exactly what is called political apathy? Inshallah.
All right. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin. Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahul qawli. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. To all IKIM radio listeners who are tuning into Open Forum this evening. Thank you again to Hajjah Maslina for having me on Open Forum this week. So as you have said, this week we are going to talk about political apathy, addressing political apathy. But before I define political apathy, maybe we need to specifically look at the word apathy itself. We are familiar with the words, for example, sympathy and empathy, right? So,
Yes.
what is sympathy? Sympathy means feeling of pity, feeling of sadness over another person's misfortune. So, this is something which is very familiar, or we are familiar with it. Empathy basically also means the ability to understand and share the feeling of another. It is as if we are in that person's position. That is a feeling of empathy. So, what is apathy then? So, we're talking about political apathy. Apathy is basically, lack of enthusiasm. It's actually lack of concern. You lack interest or the feeling of indifference. So, that is the meaning of the word apathy. So when we're talking about political apathy, we are actually talking about the lack of interest towards politics. This is in simple terms, yeah. So it can be lack of interest in, for example, elections. It can be lack of interest in political events, public meetings, the voting process. So anything that has got to do with the political process, political apathy is actually having this feeling of disinterested. You're not interested in all the whole process. So when we're talking about political apathy, why it is a concern, it is because political apathy, we can say that it threatens democracy, right? So when citizens do not participate in the political process, for example, election, it can lead to more political problems and concerns such as dishonesty, corruption, and so on. So and when we talk about political apathy, it can exist in certain forms, in several forms. For example, interest apathy. That means you're not interested in the political process and anything that has got the term politics in it. All right. So,
Yeah.
and then you have also voter apathy. That means you're not interested, in the election process, or you do not want to play your role as voters in elections, and so on. So that is voter apathy. And you've also got information apathy. So, for example, any information that has any political sense into it, you're not interested, or any information that is related to politics, you're not interested, you're disinterested. So,
Right.
this is political apathy. So,
Thank
this is the
you.
definition. When you ask the question, what is political apathy?
Mhm.
This is what we are talking about.
So, okay, how is it relevant to us today? Are we having that situation in a, you know,
Yeah. All right. It's actually not a concern just in Malaysia. I mean, it is actually a worldwide concern when we're
okay?
talking about political apathy. It is important and foremost is also relevant in today's context because
Mm-hmm.
we see that all around the world there are people who are disinterested in the political process, such as voting. Yeah, in Malaysia as well, we can see that there are people who are hesitant to take part in elections, hesitant to vote because they feel that they do not make much difference to the outcome of the voting process, or they are simply not interested because they have been, marginalized, or they see no point in participating in any political process.
Mm-hmm.
So political apathy actually affects voter turnout. In countries, especially when voting is not, compulsory, where they do not make it as, as it is required under the law, you can see that the voter turnout actually is affected, very much affected. And so when we're talking about political apathy, the problem is, especially we can see it during the election process, because people are not interested, or people don't turn out during voting process. Countries
Mm-hmm.
like, the United States, for example, the number of people who, do not vote in midterm elections is also, very much alarming, because they feel they do not have to participate, or they're not interested to participate. There's a midterm elections, in US, for example, you've got the election, and then you've got the midterm election. So the numbers in the midterm elections are somehow, low because of political apathy among the citizens. And you can see that in certain countries like in, in the African continent, you've got countries like Nigeria, like Kenya, whereby the numbers of people who vote is also very low. I mean, the voter turnout percentage is very low. So this is where political apathy is actually a concern, and is also relevant in understanding why it happened. So in Malaysia, we can see
Mm-hmm.
that during general elections, we've got certain places where the voter turnout may be around 75% above, and so on. Still, that is considered as low. When we're talking about high percentage, it's actually above 85, above 80, almost 90 something. So if it's lesser than that, we need to be wary why this exists. So when we're talking about political apathy, it is relevant into this context, because we want people to participate in the process, participate in the, so that democracy will survive, and democracy will, grow to become a platform whereby citizens have a place to say, or they have the right to actually make a choice. So that is
Mm-hmm.
through the election process.
All right. Okay. So why do you think this is happening? What is the reason behind this
All right.
political apathy?
So yeah, we're going to the causes of political apathy. um, we see that when we're talking about political apathy, we are not just talking about a certain group age, although there are concerns that, there is a percentage of younger people who are not interested in politics. And we need to understand why this happened. But there are some writers or some scholars actually try to look at what are the real causes. So they realize that one, it can stem from the lack of understanding of politics and government. They do not understand how the government, or how political system function, how it works, and so on. So they don't see any value in their participation.
Mm-hmm.
If in election through voting, of they do not see the benefit and cost of the need of government policies. So there are
Right.
people who are like this, right? So when they do not, when they are not aware, or where they do not understand their role, or how they can actually participate, this is where it becomes a concern. So lack of understanding over, political process, over government system, and so on, they don't feel that they can bring about any change. So this is also another cause to political apathy. The second cause, Mas, when we're talking about political apathy, we're talking about alienation, where voters feel that the political system do not work for them. So any
Mm-hmm.
attempt to influence the system is a fruitless exercise for them. So this is also the reason why political apathy happen among citizens, among people of certain groups in the society. And we also have a concern whereby uh, voters fatigue. I mean, they are tired of election, all right, where elections are simply too often, or voters find the process too tiring, too hectic for them, so they decide not to participate. So there are certain reasons why this happen, and or they do not trust the electoral process, or if there is any alleged of electoral fraud, and this has actually discouraged public participation. So all of these causes or all of these reasons bring about this feeling of indifference, a feeling of do not want to be part of the process, or they're simply not interested. Uh,
Hmm.
so when we're talking about political apathy,
Yeah.
we have to also understand there is also another reason that why people are not interested.
Okay.
Sometimes the in countries like, for example, in African continent, there are
Mhm.
concern whereby the election process can become too dangerous or too toxic for the
Mhm.
political environment. When there is violence, maybe after the whole election process, so it actually scare the citizens away from participating in political action. So this
Right.
is another reason why political apathy exists among
Mhm.
people in certain countries. So, like for example, in Malaysia, we see that when it comes to election period, it becomes like a fair whereby people use the election or the what do you call that, the period to actually
Mhm.
sell their candidates, the ideas and so on.
Yeah.
So but although now we see the strict SOP being implemented, is actually there are reasons behind it. I think the government does not impose it out of just because they want certain things to come, but actually it is because of the pandemic, the health concern. So the SOP is there to actually ensure the safety of the whole process. So maybe there are people who are disinterested in politics because they do not see the value in their role as why they should participate in politics, or why should they be aware of anything political, or why
Mm.
should they care about who is going to be their leaders and so on. So this is actually a process, or this is actually a concern when it comes to political participation, and also the realization that political apathy do exist and it must be addressed, and
Mhm.
the causes are clear. People know
Yeah.
the reasons behind it. So how we are going to tackle the causes, or the impact that it might have upon the democracy system and also upon the whole process. So that is
Right.
another area that we must talk about, Mas.
Yes, thank you. You mentioned, Puan Annie, just now that the younger age, the group, that younger age group, mostly the one are not interested in politics these
Mm-hmm.
days. And we know that these group are the future leaders of the country.
Yeah.
If this is, taking place right now, I mean, the situation is like this, it's going to affect
Mm-hmm.
future political situation in any country that is happening right now. So what are the consequences of the result of political apathy
All
for
right.
their attention? Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Why we say, or why many researchers
Mm.
find that the youth or the younger generation are not interested in political process or political system and so on. I think it is because of they lack understanding. They lack the political awareness. They only see politics as being just one dimension. Maybe they just look at politics as being just through the election process, right? But actually, politics is about so many other things. So maybe they do not understand, or they do not see the benefit of them participating in political activities. Because we
Mm-hmm.
have to understand when we're talking about political activities, it's not just about election, it's not just about voting, it's actually playing your role, or upholding your right as a citizen, and playing your part and contributing constructively for the nation. So we have to understand that. So the consequences of political apathy, when we're talking about uh, what happened if the level of political apathy is high in society. One, it is actually is going to become a threat to democratic dispensation, whereby when a politician wins an election in a political process, all right, through voting, there exists high level of whereby there is high level of political apathy. It will actually indicate that he or she, the leader who being elected, actually won with a small number of votes,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this can actually affect the effect of it is actually to the confidence level of the candidate. If you realize, if you understand it, whereby he or she might feel that he won not because he or she is popular, all right,
Mm-hmm.
but it's actually because of the low number of voters turning up for the election. All right,
Right.
so
Mm-hmm.
that actually can impact the confidence level, the integrity, or maybe the whole process of electing a leader, a political leader in a democracy or in a democratic process. Another consequence of political apathy is when elections are not representative. Results of elections are supposed to reflect majority sentiment,
Right.
right? But with political apathy, it's actually going to be difficult to gauge what is the
Mm-hmm.
majority sentiment, because the number of those participating in the process, in the election process, is low. So when it's low, it doesn't reflect what is the majority sentiment. All right,
Right.
um, and the when we're talking about the consequence, it also will affect the aspect of good governance and decision making, Mas. Because when people are not interested in politics, do not want to participate in anything that they feel is it's political in nature, all right, it will actually cause other problems, all right.
Mm-hmm.
For example, um, with political apathy, all right, the consequence,
Yeah.
it will erode the check and balance mechanism. It will erode the accountability. It will actually affect the rule of law and ultimately causing bad governance. And
Yes.
it might give wrong people access to power. Right. So we have to understand that political apathy does not just uh, impact or affect the individual, but it also affect the society. Yeah? And
Mm-hmm.
it actually hinders community contribution to the national development process, where
Mm-hmm.
especially when we talk about the focus needed on a specific area and so on, it will be affected. It will be affected. Yeah. And another consequence as well when we're talking about political apathy is actually there will be social and psychological damage due to political apathy, because there will not be any personal political interaction. Like, political leaders will not be able to actually gain support or constructively interact with people in certain areas, because people in the area are not interested in anything political. So political apathy would actually cause that. So this is whereby it will bring about that psychological damage, not just to people in the society, but
Mm-hmm.
also to the leaders as well. So this one we have to understand the impact or the effect of it on various segments of society.
Right. Thank you. Now, how would you suggest this be addressed? Political
All right.
apathy. Yeah.
Okay, when we're talking about political apathy, it is not something new. It is being, people, many scholars have actually wrote about it.
Mm-hmm.
There are many articles, journal articles, academic research talking about the problems of political apathy and how we should address it. What are the effects of political apathy upon individuals and upon society? So how should this be addressed? One, as what I have said, that the importance of political awareness, whereby
Mm-hmm.
um, we need to increase political awareness through civic education. So we need to teach people about the roles and responsibility as citizens, and the roles that you can play through political participation, and how citizens, common citizens, like like you and I, like anyone on the street, or anyone can actually contribute to help resolve national and local issues through voting, through political interaction, through contribution of ideas in a political organization. So this can be done if we increase the awareness, or
Mm-hmm.
we teach people how this is possible.
Yes.
And we also need to talk about the privilege of voting. Sometimes people
Mm-hmm.
do not realize what is the better. I mean, what is the privilege? What are the benefits of the voting system for them individually,
Right.
right? So sometimes you and I, we just go for voting during elections because we know that that is our responsibility. But not many people realize that as citizens of a country, right, you have the right. When you fulfill the criteria, the what do you call that? You have fulfilled certain age to vote and so on. You have that
Mm-hmm.
particular right that you can exercise.
Yes.
So you need to be told, or people need to be told, the privilege of them as voters in a country,
Mm-hmm.
right? So how they can actually contribute. So this is one way we can address political apathy, whereby we have to help to create that sense of awareness through education, through political
Mm-hmm.
education, through telling people how actually it will benefit them.
Mm-hmm.
You have to contribute, how they can actually contribute, how they can actually give back to the society through this voting process and so on. So this is an understanding that we must make sure that people realize it is important for them to actually participate, and do not let this feeling of not interested, or
Mm-hmm.
we have to understand people sometimes get tired with regard, because of the political process, rivalries, and so on. So
Right.
lethargy, voters'
Mm.
lethargy is real, right? So citizens' lethargy is real. So we have to address this. So
Yeah.
how can we address this? The government need to create that sense of awareness. And
Mm-hmm.
another way on how actually political apathy can be addressed is actually through leadership, right? Um, what politics is all about is actually about, if we're talking from the political science perspective, politics is actually about the art of power struggle,
Mm-hmm.
right? So uh, leaders might lose the plot on actually the notion of politics as a mechanism to advance the welfare of the people. It is
Right.
not just about getting that power, it's actually about getting that power to advance the welfare of the people.
Mm-hmm.
So, how to address political apathy? We need leaders, or, leaders must be sincere in this
Yes.
understanding of how to advance their power, how to use their power, utilize their
Yes.
power to advance the welfare of the people. So through this realization, I think the common people would see the sincerity of the leadership when they actually use their position, when they actually use the power that they have to, assist the common citizen, to help promote the welfare of the common citizen.
Right.
So the sometimes the problem comes when we as common citizens see that there is constant power struggle that might actually cause political apathy,
Mm-hmm.
where voters, they feel disinterested in the rivalries that exist. Yeah, so people need
Yes.
to be convinced that they are of importance. So individual, common citizens need to be told, or need to be constantly reminded that they are important, right? That's why they always say that every vote count. Okay.
Yes.
um,
Mm-hmm.
people might be see that this is just about politicians, fighting for power. It's actually about how they can use their what do you call that, their responsibility or power as voters to make sure that leaders they then they realize that leaders
Yeah.
need to be sincere in their understanding of their role. So the people's welfare remain as a top priority, and leaders need to be sincere in making sure that whatever power that they get, all right, if they are elected, they will use it to the betterment of the society. So should not be for any personal gains or abuse of power for political revenge against their rivals and so on. So this is another aspect where we as voters we look at this. All right, we look at how political powers is being used by leaders. So people's welfare should be the main focus of leaders, and how to guide, how leaders can actually find guidance. As Muslims, we have this maqasid syariah, where leaders can actually use this as the best guidance in understanding how they can actually contribute. We
Yeah.
know that maqasid sharia is about the preservation of the five elements: the religion, the mind or the akal, the life, the offspring, and the wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Of people, of human being. So
Yeah.
as leaders, if they are sincere in their struggle or sincere in their, with regard to the power that they have, they will actually help, or they will actually make sure that they use their leadership position to advance people's welfare and to actually preserve, if from the Maqasid perspective, to preserve these elements. So when we're talking about political apathy, we are actually talking about
Mm.
how common citizens might be at the level whereby they believe that they do not have a say, or they're simply not interested, or they simply feel that their participation is not needed, or sometimes it becomes a concern whereby they are not interested because they are being marginalized, right? There are groups in society feel
Mm-hmm.
that they are being sidelined, they are being marginalized, or their welfare is not being looked at, so they decide not to participate. So they feel that there is no hope for them, all right, or
Mm-hmm.
they feel that political power or political system does not bring benefit to them, so they decide not to participate, so they decide not to be concerned of anything that
Which
is
is wrong, which is completely
yeah,
wrong.
which is, yeah, because first there should not be groups who feel that they are being treated like that. All
Yeah.
right, because marginalized group, they feel that they are being treated as such because maybe those who are in power fail to actually look at their welfare or their
Mm-hmm.
concern or address their issue. So in a society, we have to understand that there are different groups with different concerns, with different issues, different wants, and their welfare is different. So how those who are in power need to be able to look at these groups and also address each issue. So there are those in the society who feel that they are being sidelined, right? Because of that, they decide not to
Mm-hmm.
participate in anything that has got to do with election. They decide not to vote. This bring about the high level of political apathy in society. So we
Right.
need to address this. We need to be made aware that you have a say. Each
Mm-hmm.
vote count in any political process in election. Um, and I have this saying. One of the what do you call the academic says that Thomas Edison needed 10,001 bulb to actually find the right light bulb. So that one bulb actually bring about the needed change to the whole
Yes.
discovery of Thomas Edison. So we
Mm-hmm.
as voter, we if we feel that we are just one vote, but actually that one vote can bring a difference. So we have to have this understanding. So if
Yeah.
everyone has that understanding, then they would actually contribute the whole process of democracy and help
Yes.
to achieve the objective of democracy in a country. Right. So
Yeah.
inshallah, with that,
Mm-hmm.
we have the right understanding of how to address political apathy, and as individuals, we must make sure that we realize we are able to contribute positively and constructively.
Right. I like the idea of the two-way effort, the voters themselves and also leadership, like you said, because
Yes,
it's important to educate yourself first about,
yes,
to have political awareness and also literacy on what is actually going on with political situation or,
yeah,
how politics works historically, also in the future, and
yes,
yeah, leadership needs to show the true ethical example of what politics all about to make
yeah.
sure that people will actually vote, inshallah. So how would you like to
Mhm.
conclude political apathy on addressing political apathy, inshallah?
All right. Okay, thank you, Man. So, when we're talking about political apathy, the reason is actually to create that awareness as well. So that is the
Mm-hmm.
reason the conversation that we have today, because people sometimes they do not realize that it is actually a concern in a society. Leaders do not realize, or maybe they do realize.
Yeah.
Maybe they, they just need to be told on how they can actually address this.
Mm-hmm.
So, as individuals like you and I, we realize that there are groups who are not interested. There are individuals in groups who are not interested because of certain issues, because of certain things
Mm-hmm.
that are not addressed or not promoted with regard to their welfare. So we're talking about political apathy is actually to create that sense of awareness, among common people, among all of us, so that we realize that we do have a say. We can actually participate, we can actually use that power as voters, all right, and we must use that, because as citizens we have that responsibility.
Yeah.
And
And as
if
you
you
say,
call
it's
you,
a privilege. It's a
yeah,
privilege,
it's
as
a
you said.
privilege as a citizen, right? There are those who do not have that privilege, although they live in this country. So anywhere you go, everywhere you go, you have to realize that as citizen, that is a privilege that you have. So
Yeah.
use that privilege and use that as how you can actually contribute to the country. All right.
Right.
So maybe that's the conclusion that I would like to share with our listeners, inshallah.
Sure, inshallah. Thank you very much for sharing on addressing a political apathy with Puan Eni Zahura Abdul Aziz, Fellow Center for the Study of Sharia, Law and Politics, IKIM. And until we see you again soon, inshallah, Puan Eni,
Inshallah. Inshallah.
thank you once again.
Inshallah, Mas.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh.